This video covers Part 2, numbers 9 through 16 of Lesson 1-9 for Secondary 1 Math, solving inequalities and interval notation. Number 9, so let's go ahead and draw our line down from the inequality sign. And let's look on each side. So the 15 is going to stay the same for now. On the right side, though, we have like terms. This negative 3b's and the plus 5b's or positive 5b's. If we combine those, that's going to give us 2b's, and we bring down the minus 1. So we have 15 is less than or equal to 2b's minus 1. Now we're going to do the opposite of what's happening to b on the right side of our inequality. So we'll add 1 to both sides of our inequality, which gives us 16 is less than or equal to 2b's. Next, we have 2 times b, so we're going to divide by 2 on both sides of our inequality sign. Notice we divided by a positive, so our inequality sign stays the same. And we get b on the right. On the left, we have 8. So 8 is less than or equal to b, or b is greater than or equal to 8. Writing this in interval notation, we write b is an element from, and now here we want to make sure we use a bracket because we have the less than or equal to, 8 to infinity. Graphing, 8 in the middle, 9 to the right, 7 to the left. We'll go ahead and place a closed circle at 8 and an arrow going right to infinity. Number 10, here we're going to again draw our line down from our inequality sign. And we notice on the left, it's already simplified. On the right, we can use distributive property and multiply 3 to m, which gives us 3m, or 3 times m, and 3 times negative 2, which gives us negative 6. So now we have our inequality, and we're going to do the opposite of what's happening to m, since it's on one side of the inequality. And we're going to add 6 to both sides of our inequality first. So that gives us negative 11 is greater than or equal to 3m's, or 3 times m, which helps us remember that we need to do the opposite of that, which is divide by 3 instead of multiply by 3. And we get negative 11 thirds is greater than or equal to m, since we divided by a positive number to both sides. So writing this in interval notation, we have m is an element, and notice that m is less than or equal to, so we're going to go from negative infinity to negative 11 thirds, and we're going to put a bracket since it's less than or equal to. To graph it, we'll place a negative 11 thirds here in the middle. Now think about this. We count by threes. 3, 6, 9. That's 3. So on the right will be negative 3. On the left will be negative 4. Now let's go ahead and have a closed circle, since we have that bracket on the negative 11 thirds. And our arrow goes left because it's going to negative infinity, or things that are less than a negative 11 thirds. Okay, number 11. Go ahead and draw our line down from our inequality sign. We look for like terms or distributive property on each side. Looks like on the left we have a negative 3 and a minus 7. So we can combine those like terms. We'll get 4x minus 10. Now on the right, we can't simplify 20, so it stays 20. Now we want to do the opposite of what's happening to our variable x. So we're going to add 10 to both sides of our inequality, which gives us 4x's is greater than 30. And next we have 4 times x, or 4x's, so we're going to divide by 4, do the opposite of multiplying, and we get x, and since we divided by a positive, it stays the same for our inequality sign, is greater than 30 over 4. Well, I think we can simplify that. They're both even numbers, so they're both divisible by 2. So 30 divided by 2 is 15. And 4 divided by 2 is 2. Now, 15 is not divisible by 2, so we have our simplified fraction. So x is greater than 15 halves. So in interval notation, we write x as an element from 15 halves to infinity, since it's open to the variable x. So we go ahead and mark it, 15 halves. Now let's think about what this is. As a mixed number, 15 halves would be 14 divided by 2 is 7, so 7 and a half. So we have 8 to the right, 7 to the left of this. And we're going to have an open circle, arrow going right to positive infinity. Okay, number 12, we have negative 2w's, and we have plus 3 times 4w minus 1. So we got some distributive property here. On the right, there's nothing to do. It's just a 2. So let's distribute. So 3 times 4w's is 12w's. We should bring down the negative 2w's out front. And then we have 3 times negative 1. That's negative 3. So now we can combine these like terms. Right here, we got negative 2w's plus 12w's, which gives us 10w's minus 3. On the right, we still have our 2. And now we're going to do the opposite of what's happening to our variable, w. So we're going to add 3 to both sides of our inequality. And we get 10w's is less than or equal to 5. And then we're going to divide, since we're multiplying 10 times w, divide by 10. Do that opposite. So we get w is a less than or equal to, since we divided by a positive number, 1/2. Because 5 divided by 10 is 1/2. Writing it in interval notation, we write w is an element from, since it's less than negative infinity, so I put my parenthesis, comma, 1/2, but it can be 1/2, so we're going to use a bracket. So on our number line, we have 1/2 in the middle. I'm going to go with 1 to the right, 0 to the left, and we're going to have a closed circle, and arrows going left to negative infinity. Okay, number 13. Notice here, if I draw the line down from my inequality sign, I actually have distributive property on both sides of our inequality. So that's what I'm going to take care of first. Negative 6 times 5 is negative 30. Negative 6 times negative x would make it positive 6x's. Alright, on the right, we have negative 2 times x, which is negative 2x's. And negative 2 times 15, which is going to make it a negative 30. Now we need to get the variables on the same side of the inequality. So we're going to add 2 x's on both sides, so that there are no x's left on the right side of our inequality. So we end up with negative 30 plus 8x's is greater than negative 30. Now we want to do the opposite of what's happening to x to get it isolated or by itself. So we will add 30 to both sides of our inequality, which gives us 8x's is greater than 0. You might already see the answer to this, but let's go ahead and finish this off. 8 times x, so we're going to divide by 8. So we end up x is greater than, since we divided by a positive here, 0. Now let's write that in interval notation. So x is an element, so it's greater than, from 0, we're using a parenthesis because there's no or equal to infinity. Graphing it, we'll go ahead and place 0 in the middle, 1 to the right, negative 1 to the left, and we'll have an open circle at 0, arrow going right to positive infinity. Number 14, let's go ahead and draw our line down from the inequality sign. And notice again we have distributive property on both sides of the inequality, so let's do that first. Negative 4 times negative 3 is positive 12. Negative 4 times 2x's would make it negative 8x's. And when we're distributing, it's not changing our inequality sign. Negative 2 times 1, negative 2. Negative 2 times 4x's, negative 8x's. Now, we want to get x's to the same side of our inequality. So we can eliminate the negative 8x's on the left side by adding 8x's. So we need to add 8x's on the right side as well. So simplifying, we get 12 on the left side of our inequality, and we get negative 2 on the right side, since our x's all simplified to 0. So we have 12 is greater than or equal to negative 2. Is this a true statement? Well, yes, 12 is greater than negative 2, so we can write true, but that's not our solution. We know it's a true statement. Our solution is all real numbers, and that's that fancy R. But that's not how we write it in interval notation. So interval notation, we say that x is an element from negative infinity to infinity, or positive infinity. Okay, now to graph it, we just make some mark on this number line. I usually put 0 just to identify where we are on the number line. And then it's a line with an arrow going in both directions forever. And that's our graph of an all real number solution. Okay, so number 15. So we're going to draw our line down from the inequality sign. The 10 is going to stay, so we don't need to worry about that. We got 4 W's, so I'm bringing that down because I notice we have distributive property. Now I want to point out that this is a minus 5, sometimes that's how we refer to it. I treat it as a negative 5 and distribute the negative with the 5 through our parentheses. So we get negative 5 times 2 W's, which would be negative 10 W's. And negative 5 times negative 3, which is positive 15. Now, notice we got some like terms that we can combine. 4 W's minus 10 W's. So we get 10 is less than or equal to negative 6 W's plus 15. Next, we're going to do the opposite of what's happening to our variable, since it's on one side of our inequality and it's in one term. So we're going to subtract 15 from both sides of our inequality, and that gives us a negative 5 is less than or equal to negative 6 W's. And now we have negative 6 times W, so the opposite of that is dividing by negative 6. So we do that to both sides of our inequality, and we get W is going to be less than or equal to 5/6. Okay, writing this in interval notation, we have W is an element from, and since it's less than, pointing to the W, it's a negative infinity, to 5/6, and it's a bracket since it's an or equal to. So let's go ahead and graph 5/6, and then we could do 1 and 0 to the left. We'll have a closed circle at 5/6, and an arrow going left to negative infinity. Okay, so number 16. Now, don't freak out about the fractions just yet. Let's begin by drawing our line down from the inequality sign. And let's think about this distributive property. We're going to distribute negative 3/4 in on the left. So negative 3/4 times 12 V's. Let's think about what's happening here. We have 4 that I'm dividing by, right? That's a division bar right here. So we're dividing by 4. So let's think about what 12 is divided by 4. Well, that's 3. Then we multiply it by negative 3, so we get negative 9 V's. So likewise, if we're distributing this to negative 8, 4 and 8, so 8 divided by 4 is 2. So I have a negative 3 times a negative 2, which is positive 6. On the right side, we have 1/5, which is just dividing by 5. So what's negative 10 V's divided by 5? Or 1/5 of negative 10 V's? Well, that's going to be negative 2 V's. and 1/5 of 20 is 4. So now we've simplified it, and it was a lot easier than we might have thought when we first looked at the problem. So let's go ahead and get our variables to the same side of our inequality. So I'm going to add 9 v's to both sides of our inequality. So I have no v's left on the left side of our inequality. I have a 6, which is less than 7 v's plus 4. Now I'm going to do the opposite of what's happening to the v in this case. So we're going to subtract 4 on both sides. We get 2 is less than 7 v's. Next, we're going to divide by 7 since we have 7 times v. So we have 2/7 is less than v. And notice I didn't change the inequality signs here because we never multiplied both sides by a negative number or divided by a negative number. So interval notation, v is an element from, and here we're going to make a parenthesis since we have a less than, and we're going from 2/7 to infinity, and a parenthesis. Graphing, we're going to go 2/7. We know that that's between 1 and 0, and we're going to have an open circle, an arrow going right to positive infinity. This concludes the video for Lesson 1-9, Part 2 for Secondary 1 Math, solving inequalities and interval notation.